What if everything you've learned throughout your life about Jesus was just a small fraction of a much deeper, more complex truth, and perhaps even dangerous? What if behind the sacred accounts, the established dogmas, and the canonical gospels, there was a strategic silence, a purposeful abyss, where one of the greatest spiritual and historical secrets of humanity hides? Imagine for a moment that behind the image of the suffering Christ on the cross, there was a living lineage, a legacy of blood and spirit passed on not only through words, but through real descendants, eternal codes hidden in flesh, genetics, and mission. This possibility not only challenges official theology, it threatens to dismantle millennial power structures, open portals of consciousness, and question the very concept of eternity. And the most impactful, all of this may, in some way, be within you. The absence of certain details in the Gospels is not accidental, nor due to the apostles' omission. It's a calculated silence, an intentional gap. Some texts were rejected, burned, lost, but others were deliberately left out, like pieces of a forbidden puzzle. Why, in a narrative as detailed as the New Testament, is there virtually no talk of Jesus' life between his 12th and 30th years? Why was Mary Magdalene, so close to Christ, reduced to a peripheral figure, deformed, distorted, and marginalized? And why were texts such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, and the Gospel of Mary so vehemently excluded? The answers do not reside solely in theological choices, but in strategies of spiritual domination and the systematic denial of a legacy that could change the history of humanity. The idea that Jesus had a lineage, a literal descent, was for centuries fought against as heresy. But why? Because it was not just a moral scandal. It was an ontological threat to the monopoly of the divine. If Christ had left a living lineage, a direct succession, then spiritual authority would no longer be tied to the clerical hierarchy, but to the blood and conscience passed down through this line. This would alter not only faith, but politics, culture, and the very destiny of civilization. Christ's lineage represents more than heredity. It symbolizes the continuity of a cosmic purpose. Blood and spirit intertwined as invisible threads, carrying not just memory, but power. And this power, once accessed, can no longer be tamed by any institution. Mary Magdalene was not just a follower. In many hidden texts, she appears as Jesus' intimate companion, someone who understood his teachings on a level that even Peter did not reach. In the Gospel of Philip, she is referred to as koinonos, a Greek term for companion or consort. There are records that point not only to a spiritual bond, but to a sacred union, perhaps even a marital one. And if this is true, what would prevent this union from having produced an offspring, a new spiritual seed planted on earth, not to perpetuate blood out of vanity, but to serve as a conduit of consciousness, a living bridge between heaven and earth, a lineage capable of carrying in its essence the DNA of the divine purpose? The first centuries of Christianity were marked by a silent dispute between esoteric knowledge and emerging dogma. The Gnostics saw Christ not as the literal only Son of God, but as a model of Christ consciousness accessible to all who awakened to their divine nature. In this context, lineage was not merely biological, but spiritual, a succession of initiates who guarded and transmitted the codes of awakening. This succession, unlike the ecclesiastical structure, was fluid, symbolic, energetic, and perhaps also genetic. Spirituality, in this understanding, was not a belief system, but a science of the soul and blood, an engineering of the expanding spirit. With the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, under the influence of Constantine, much of what was spiritual diversity was reduced to a single doctrinal path. Texts were suppressed, voices were silenced, visions were erased. The historical Christ was amalgamated with the dogmatic Christ, and the lineage erased. The truth was shaped, edited, delimited. But fragments of this truth survived, in hidden manuscripts, in oral traditions, in cryptic symbols scattered across ancient temples. And now, more than ever, these pieces are starting to come together again. A puzzle that unites history, spirituality, and a lost science of the spirit, which may have been passed down from generation to generation as a silent code of awakening. The most provocative question may not only be whether Christ had a lineage, but whether that lineage still exists. And if it exists, where is it? In hidden families, living in the shadows? Or could the true heritage be spiritual, latent, dormant in millions of beings who, upon awakening, become a living part of this current? Blood is more than biology. It is a symbol. Blood carries traces of the soul, of ancestral memory, of unfulfilled promises from entire generations. And if Christ's lineage is also spiritual, then perhaps it's not just about who was born from whom, but about who has awakened to the same call. Throughout history, lineages have always been treated with reverence or persecution. From the dynasties of Egypt to the royal houses of Europe, blood heritage has been seen as a sign of power, purity, or curse. But when we talk about the lineage of Christ, what's at stake is not just the blood, it's the spirit that enlivens it. It's the cosmic project behind the divine incarnation. A project that involves the expansion of human consciousness, the remembrance of divine origin, and access to dimensions where time is not linear, where the spirit is not prisoner of the body, and where eternity is a state of full presence. The concept of eternity, in this context, is not an infinite time, but a fusion point between flesh and spirit, where consciousness assumes its highest form. If Christ's lineage is real, it is the thread that connects matter to eternity, DNA to the divine, blood to purpose. This thread cannot be cut, only forgotten, and that's why so many forces throughout the centuries have strived so hard to erase it from history, not out of fear of the truth itself, but out of fear of what it would awaken. A conscious, empowered human being connected to the source, no longer dependent on intermediaries. The Da Vinci Code, despite its flaws and fictionalizations, touched on something essential: the institutional world's discomfort with the possibility of a sacred lineage. But the book and the film only scratched the surface. The real question is not whether there was a marriage or descendants, but what this lineage represents. It is the symbol of the union between the divine and the human, between spirit and flesh, between the invisible and the manifest. A symbol so powerful that it had to be hidden in plain sight, distorted, vilified, so that it would never be fully understood. In each cell of the human body there is memory, not just biological, but energetic. Science is beginning to explore what ancient traditions already knew, that the body holds traumas, dreams, abilities, and memories not directly experienced, but inherited. This suggests that if Christ's lineage carries a spiritual code, it can be activated. It can be awakened through consciousness, connection with purpose, and the sincere search for truth beyond imposed narratives. And this activation is not a privilege of blue blood. It is a call for everyone who feels they were born with a mission that transcends the everyday. In the end, the echoing question is deeper than any dogma can answer. What if you are part of this lineage? Not because you've inherited noble blood, but because you carry in your soul the same frequency as Christ, the courage to love beyond fear, to forgive beyond pain, to awaken amidst darkness. And what if this legacy is alive in you, just waiting to be remembered? The lineage of Christ, then, wouldn't just be a matter of the past, but the key to the future. A lost connection between blood, spirit, and eternity. And perhaps, just perhaps, it's closer than you think. From the most ancient times, blood has been revered as the ultimate symbol of life. Entire civilizations viewed it as a sacred link between the visible and the invisible, between man and the divine. In Egypt, among the Hebrew tribes, within the Druid orders, and in many archaic cultures, blood was not just a vital fluid. It was the bearer of essence, the dwelling of the soul, the vessel of ancestral memory. Blood was sacrament, covenant, promise. It sealed pacts, anointed kings, consecrated priests, and perpetuated lineages that were not only of flesh and bone, but of spiritual mission. This is why, when speaking of the possibility of a sacred lineage stemming from Jesus, we are not merely speculating about biological descent, but tapping into the deepest and most symbolic language humanity knows about legacy, purpose, and transcendence. Throughout history, various lineages have been protected with almost fanatical rigor. Kings would marry their cousins to preserve the blue blood. Priests were chosen according to family inheritances. entire peoples based their social structure on hereditary castes. But no lineage, in all known history, has been as carefully watched, hidden, and at the same time, feared as the one believed to have been born from the union between Jesus and Mary Magdalene. If it truly existed, it became the center of a silent and ancient plot, where power, faith, fear, and mystery intertwined in a continuous cycle of concealment and revelation. And those who dared to protect it, transmit it, or even mention it, came to be seen as threats, heretics, or enemies of the dominant religious order. The Knights Templar emerge in this scenario not only as crusading soldiers, but as guardians of something far more valuable than treasures or relics. There are indications found in hidden documents and oral traditions that the Templars were founded to protect the secrets related to Christ's lineage. In their excavations under Solomon's Temple, they would have found texts, genealogies, records that proved the continuity of the sacred bloodline. These insights were not revealed to the public because their power was too great. They would undermine the power structure centralized in the Church, question the dogmas of virginity, divine exclusivity, and, perhaps most threateningly, would grant spiritual autonomy to the common individual. The Priory of Sion, a secret society allegedly older than the Templars, is said to have had the mission to protect this lineage through the centuries. Its members would be direct descendants or spiritually designated to ensure the survival of the lineage and its teachings. Leonardo da Vinci, Isaac Newton, and other great geniuses of humanity are believed to have been part of this order, and not by chance. Their works carry symbols, codes, and encrypted messages about this lineage, about the sacred feminine, and about the lost union between blood and spirit. Art, architecture, science, and spirituality were used as a secret language, disguised to preserve what could not be spoken aloud. The genealogy of Jesus, described in the Gospels of Matthew and Luke, is often overlooked by modern scholars, yet a pattern lies hidden there. Both genealogies point to a direct link with the house of David, and consequently, with a royal lineage of anointed kings. The royal anointing was not just political, it was spiritual. The word Messiah means the anointed one. Jesus did not emerge from nothing, he came from a prophetic lineage. And if Mary Magdalene also belonged to a sacred lineage, perhaps originating from the Benjaminites or from temple spiritual traditions, their marriage would not just be an emotional union, but symbolic, alchemical, the fusion of two legacies that would give rise to a new era of consciousness. Medieval documents speak of Mary Magdalene's escape to the south of France, following the crucifixion of Jesus. Legend has it that she landed with her daughter Sarah, accompanied by other women close to Christ. In Gaulish lands, she is said to have lived in caves, preached in secret, and gave rise to a lineage that would later be known as the Merovingian, a dynasty of kings who claimed direct descent from Jesus. This lineage ruled parts of Europe with a peculiar mysticism, surrounded by rituals and symbols that disturbed the Church. Their power was seen as a threat, and over the centuries, it was diluted, persecuted, and suppressed. But traces of this lineage still appear in the coats of arms, in family traditions, and in myths that have never completely disappeared. The Church, throughout the Middle Ages, ferociously persecuted anyone who spoke of a lineage of Christ. Entire orders were decimated, libraries burned, occultist priests were silenced, all to prevent this golden thread from escaping institutional control. The idea that the blood of Christ still flowed in the veins of living, ordinary humans, whether awakened or not, was an unbearable heresy. It placed the divine within the human body, making each being a potential sacred temple, a living ark. The body ceased to be sinful and became a portal. This perception broke with the theology of guilt and punishment, establishing a spirituality of empowerment, personal responsibility, and inner activation. The sacred lineage was not just a biological secret. It carried spiritual codes that transcend DNA. In ancient traditions, it was believed that certain groups carried a different frequency, a glow in the soul, a more direct connection with the original source. These beings were not superior, but they carried a mission. They were here to keep the flame of consciousness alive, to remind humanity of its stellar origin, its divine nature, and its potential for redemption. The blood was the channel, but the spirit was the content. The lineage was not just genealogical, it was vibrational, energetic, a continuous thread of light that spans centuries, incarnating in different bodies, in different cultures, with a single goal: awakening. In ancient mystical traditions, blood was spoken of as the carrier of the spirit's memory, a type of living intelligence capable of storing emotional records, experiences, and even spiritual pacts. Today, science is beginning to glimpse at epigenetics as a bridge between genetics and environment, showing that our experiences can indeed leave marks on our DNA and be transmitted. Imagine then what an enlightened being like Jesus could have left behind if his spiritual code intertwined with the genetic, forming a line of incarnated souls with a collective mission. This mission wouldn't be about dominance or superiority, but about planetary healing, collective transmutation, and remembering the origin. The Templars, upon returning from the Holy Land, brought back not only visible treasures, they brought spiritual maps, hidden texts, symbols, and names. With this knowledge, they built cathedrals, traced energy lines across Europe, and created architecture that mirrored the human body and the stars. Each stone, each symbol was a silent book. And within many of these codes were clues about the sacred lineage. A lineage that was not to be idolized, but understood as a mirror of our own essence. The sacred blood is not a genetic privilege, but a spiritual calling. And this call continues to echo through time, waiting to be answered. Finally, the idea that blood and spirit are separate is a modern illusion. In the deepest traditions, spirit and flesh are two sides of the same coin, two channels of consciousness expression. The lineage of Christ, if true, represents not just a human legacy. It is the living reminder that the divine became flesh, not to distance itself from humanity, but to show that the human is divine in its origin. That blood, when purified by love and purpose, becomes a road to the spirit, and that this road remains alive, pulsating in the silence of history, waiting for those who dare to remember, feel, and reactivate. There is a question that pulses silently in the heart of those who dare to transcend the literal. What if the true legacy left by Christ was not just in the flesh, but in a matrix of universal consciousness accessible to all who can tune into its frequency? This possibility transforms the idea of lineage from something merely hereditary to something quantum, multidimensional. Jesus, more than a man, was a living transmitter of a spiritual code, not just a savior, but an activator. He did not come to be adored as the only one, but to reflect a human potential not yet awakened. And this potential, according to ancient traditions and forgotten teachings, is recorded in the innermost core of our being, a code that vibrates between the helices of DNA and the subtle layers of the soul. This code is not metaphorical. It is a spiritual reality expressed in energetic language. At the heart of contemporary discoveries in epigenetics, there is already talk of how emotions, beliefs, and experiences shape genetic expression. In other words, we are not prisoners of inherited DNA, but active co-creators of how it manifests. This is a bridge between science and mysticism. And what if, in addition to the genetic load inherited from parents, there was a spiritual coding that could be activated by high frequencies of consciousness? And what if this divine gene was latent in everyone, waiting for a specific combination of vibration, intention, and awakening to express itself? Christ, then, would have been the first to fully activate this code, not as a miracle, but as a natural consequence of a complete alignment between spirit, mind, and body. This concept does not negate the existence of a bloodline, but expands it. It elevates the idea of inheritance to a level where the spiritual intertwines with the biological, a code that could be inherited either by birth or by initiation, by internal activation. In the Gnostic texts, Jesus often says that the kingdom of God is within you. This statement echoes a profound reality. The sacred is not outside, but encoded within us. Being part of the Christ lineage does not require belonging to a privileged genealogical tree, but aligning oneself with the purpose, vibrating on the frequency of unconditional love, living in communion with the source, and those who do so become legitimate heirs to the mission of Christ. The mystical traditions of the East and West all point to the same idea under different names: the inner Christ, the higher self, the Atman, the divine spark. In all of them, there is the recognition that consciousness can be elevated to a point where it transcends duality and merges with the whole. Jesus did not come to establish a religion, but to open a path for the expansion of consciousness. He said, "You are gods." This statement was not symbolic, it was literal. He pointed to the presence of a dormant divine code, waiting to be activated through spiritual practice, compassion, and self-realization. And this transforms the entire idea of lineage. It ceases to be an invisible thread of DNA and becomes a flame, a frequency, a continuous vibration that anyone can embody. Today, the science of the unified field and consciousness is beginning to uncover what spiritual masters have always known, that we are more than body and mind. We are an energy field. We are vibrational information. In this field, memories are not just neurological, but holographic. Each cell stores not only biological instructions, but subtle records of everything the soul has ever experienced. This means that it is possible to carry within oneself the memory of Christ, not just as a cultural remembrance, but as a living frequency, a vibration that, when activated, transforms the human being from the inside out. It awakens gifts, intensifies intuition, expands empathy, activates spiritual vision. It's like an internal seal that, once touched, forever changes the way we perceive the world and our role in it. The process of Christification, in this sense, is not a supernatural event, but an evolutionary process. An internal alchemy where the ego is transmuted, the heart is opened, and the mind aligns with the higher will. Many believe that spiritual ascension is something ethereal and distant, but it is, in fact, deeply embodied. The body is the temple where this transformation occurs. It is in the body that the code manifests. It is in the blood that the memory vibrates. It is in the soul that the purpose is drawn. Jesus, by fully living this integration, became a model, mirror, seed, and his lineage, more than genetic continuity, is the continuity of awakened consciousness in action in the world. Several teachings attributed to Jesus in the Gnostic and Essene texts speak about inner awakening as the true salvation. It wasn't about waiting for an external Messiah, but about discovering the Christ that dwells within each being. This wasn't just a pretty metaphor, it was an activation map. These texts speak of the inner light, the sacred sound, the creative word, codes that activate energy centers and unlock dormant DNA. The tradition of mysteries always preserved this knowledge under oath, under the risk of persecution, for whoever carries this activated code is no longer manipulable. They don't need mediators between them and the divine. They become a living temple. And this autonomy is the greatest fear of control systems. By understanding Christ's lineage as living consciousness, we break away from the limited notion of external salvation and enter a state of divine co-creation. The lineage is not a secret clan, but a collective of souls that share the same frequency, the same mission. They can recognize each other without words, by vibration, by the look, by the presence. They are scattered all over the world, in all cultures, at all times. And when they gather, even without knowing they are part of the same network, something intensifies in the field. A force manifests. The Christ consciousness becomes collective. And this is the true return of Christ, the simultaneous activation of thousands of souls that carry the same vibrational code. This understanding sheds new light on what it means to be a descendant of Christ. It's not about genealogy, but about attunement. It's not about biological inheritance, but about conscious choice. All those who choose to live according to the principles of Christ, unconditional love, service, forgiveness, unity, become part of the living lineage. This lineage is not recorded on paper, but in Akashic records. It doesn't perpetuate in palaces, but in awakened hearts. And it doesn't seek worldly power, but planetary transformation. Its purpose is not to dominate, but to illuminate. It's not to exclude, but to include. It's a profound call to remember who we are and why we are here. This spiritual code is like a star seed that needs fertile soil to germinate. The soil is the open soul. The water is conscious practice. The light is love. When these elements combine, the code activates, and a new consciousness is born within the being. It's as if the inner Christ awakens from a millennial sleep, not as an external master, but as a living presence that guides, consoles, inspires, and transforms. This inner Christ is the true heir of the lineage. He is the lost link between blood and eternity. He is the incarnated spirit, the manifested divine, the awakened human. And he is emerging now, in the silence of thousands of souls that are beginning to remember. This lineage of consciousness is indestructible. It has survived persecutions, bonfires, wars, dogmas, and millennia of oblivion. It lives in the between the lines of ancient texts, in the hidden symbols of cathedrals, in prophetic dreams, in mystical visions, in seemingly random encounters between kindred souls. It is the silent testament that truth cannot be erased, only put to sleep. And now it awakens, not as an external revolution, but as an internal elevation, a gentle breath that becomes wind, a whisper that turns into a voice, a spark that becomes a flame. And this flame is igniting hearts in all corners of the world, calling each being back to itself. In the end, the true mystery of Christ's lineage is not in knowing who his blood descendants are, but in recognizing the bearers of the same light. Those who live with an open heart, who heal with their presence, who walk with humility, who carry the truth not on their lips but in their gaze, they are the true heirs. And this legacy does not end with them, it begins. Because Christ consciousness is not a static inheritance, but a living force that multiplies with each act of compassion, each healing gesture, each choice for love instead of fear. This is how Christ lives. This is how his lineage remains eternal. For centuries, the name of Mary Magdalene has been tarnished, distorted, and pushed to the fringes of sacred history. Reduced to the image of a redeemed sinner, transformed into a symbol of female sin, she was stripped of her true identity and her spiritual mission. However, the more one digs into the ancient texts, the Gnostic Gospels, the hidden traditions, and the truths buried by official history, the clearer it becomes that Mary Magdalene was much more than a simple follower of Jesus. She was not a supporting character, but a protagonist, not a lost soul seeking salvation, but an awakened woman who deeply understood Christ's teachings. And not by chance, she was the first witness to the resurrection. This was not a detail, but a symbolic statement. She was the bearer of the new light, of the living seed, of the sacred lineage. In the Gnostic texts found in Nag Hammadi, especially the Gospel of Mary, she emerges as the one who deeply understood Christ's secret teachings. The disciples feared her, envied her, but recognized her wisdom. Peter, the symbol of the ecclesiastical patriarchy that would follow, expresses his insecurity in front of her. Did he speak with a woman in secret and not with us? The answer lies in the historical silence that followed her. Magdalene was silenced because her presence threatened the male monopoly of the divine. She was not just a woman, she was initiated, consort, bearer of the sacred feminine, and possibly the mother of a spiritual and biological lineage that the church could never control. Her image was transformed into sin, when in fact she was a symbol of integration, of balance between polarities, of alchemical union between heaven and earth. Various traditions suggest that Mary Magdalene belonged to the priestly lineage of the temple, perhaps trained in the mystical schools of Egypt or among the Essenes. It was common for women educated in these traditions to receive teachings about healing, herbs, sacred sexuality, and direct connection with the divine. Magdalene, in this context, was not just the woman who served Jesus, but a true equal. Together they formed the archetype of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine in harmonious union. This union was not just physical, but vibrational. And from this intertwining, according to some initiatory currents, a lineage emerged, not just of flesh, but of light. A new cycle was generated there, where unconditional love and the fusion of souls gave birth to a new consciousness. The presence of Magdalene at the cross, when almost all the disciples had fled, is another indication of her central role. She did not withdraw in the moment of pain, death, transformation. She remained steadfast, staring into the abyss, maintaining the frequency, holding the field. This is initiatory language. She was there as the guardian of passage, witness to the transmutation, catalyst of the resurrection. It was to her that the resurrected Christ first appeared, not by chance, but because she was the only one capable of understanding him beyond the material. She saw beyond the body. She recognized the spirit. Her vision was spiritualized, her faith transcendent, and because of this, she was chosen as the first messenger of the new reality. She became the Grail, not as an object, but as the living vessel of Christ consciousness. The concept of the Holy Grail, so sought after throughout the centuries, takes on new meaning when understood that it was never a physical chalice. The Grail is symbolic. It represents the vessel of the sacred blood. And if the sacred blood is not only Christ's, but the living lineage of awakened consciousness, then Mary Magdalene is the Grail. Her womb, her presence, her mission, everything about her symbolizes the gateway between the divine and the human. In many occult traditions, she is represented as the living ark, the one who carries the code of the new humanity. Her descent to France, her silent preachings, her stay in caves were not escapes, but missions. She went to spread the seed, to plant the code, to prepare the spiritual soil for the new era that would one day blossom. The ancient mystery schools speak of a type of love that transcends romance, an initiatory love. Between Jesus and Magdalene, there was this connection. It was not common carnal love, but a union of purposes, divine alchemy, two poles that merge to create the third element, the birth of a new consciousness. This explains why the Church could never allow this truth to come to light, because it transformed Christ from a solitary and untouchable figure into a deeply human, complete being who recognized in the feminine the key to integration. Institutional spirituality could not coexist with a Christ who loved, who united, who created. Such a Christ set free. It took power from the hands of the priests and placed it in the hands of each individual. The marginalization of Magdalene is also the marginalization of the feminine principle in spirituality. When she was reduced to the image of a prostitute, all of femininity was reduced to sin. The womb ceased to be sacred and became a source of temptation. The woman ceased to be a teacher and became a servant. This was one of the greatest distortions in the spiritual history of humanity. By hiding Mary Magdalene's mission, the Church erased half of the path. Christ without Magdalene is incomplete. Because true awakening happens in union, in integrated polarity. Christ represents the Word, Magdalene, the womb. Together, they manifest conscious creation. And this union is what opens the portals to eternity. In various esoteric traditions, Magdalene is spoken of as the embodiment of the Sophia archetype, the divine wisdom. She was more than a human being. She was a symbol of a cosmic principle, the return of the sacred feminine to spirituality. This has profound implications, because when the feminine is restored, healing occurs, separation ends, balance returns, humanity reconnects with the earth, with intuition, with compassion. The kingdom of God, then, ceases to be an abstract promise and becomes a vibrational reality. And Mary Magdalene, in this sense, was a precursor to this new world. She carried within her the frequency of healing, of reconciliation, of unity. The hidden records and Hermetic traditions have always preserved the true image of Magdalene. Even under the fire of the Inquisition's pyres, even in the face of millennia of oppression, her memory was kept alive by secret female lineages, by silent initiatory orders, by artists and mystics who concealed her presence in paintings, symbols, and coded words. The worship of Notre Dame in France is, for many scholars, a disguise for the worship of Magdalene. The Gothic cathedrals were not erected solely for the Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, but for Magdalene, the initiated virgin, the divine consort, the living seed of the eternal Christ. She was the hidden key, the lost link, the silent code that, when rediscovered, reconnects humanity with its divine origin. Honoring Mary Magdalene is to reclaim the truth of the sacred lineage. It is to accept that the divine inhabits both the masculine and the feminine. It is to allow spirituality to cease being dogmatic rigidity and become sensitive, deep, incarnate experience. It is to understand that awakening does not only happen in the mind, but in the heart, in the body, in the womb, in everyday life. Magdalene shows us that the sacred is in living with presence, with love, with truth, and that each human being is a temple, that each body is an ark, that each soul carries within it the spark of the eternal. The true return of Mary Magdalene will not be in mystical flashes or miraculous appearances. It is happening now, quietly, in the collective awakening of the sacred feminine. In men and women who rediscover lost balance, who honor intuition, who welcome healing, who live with compassion. Magdalene lives in every being that reconnects with inner wisdom. In every seeker who understands that the path of Christ is not only of the cross, but of unity. It is not only of suffering, but of creation. And her mission, which for centuries was silenced, is being reborn as a beacon. A call for all, men and women, to awaken the divine within themselves. Because without her, Christ is incomplete. But with her, heaven touches earth, and eternity becomes now. The history of humanity is not only made up of recorded facts, but also of calculated silences, of burned manuscripts, of erased memories, and of deliberately silenced voices. When it comes to the lineage of Christ and the central role of Mary Magdalene, we are not dealing with a simple historical omission. We are facing a systematic project of concealment. For centuries, powerful forces operated to take from the hands of the people the idea that the divine could be present in the flesh, in the blood, in the soul of the common human. What was at stake was not just theology, but control over embodied spirituality, the presence of a living lineage, carrying within itself the codes of Christ consciousness, was unbearable for the systems that rose on fear and separation. In the first centuries after the crucifixion, a rich diversity of interpretations and Christian communities flourished. The Essenes, the Gnostics, the Nazarenes, and other groups preserved hidden, esoteric, profound teachings. They understood that the figure of Jesus was not just for worship, but for emulation, a master who revealed the path to self-realization, to union with the inner divine. These groups had their own gospels, their initiation practices, their mystical traditions that spoke of the sacred union with the feminine and the birth of the inner light. However, with the advance of the institutionalized church and the alliance between religion and empire, an unrelenting hunt began for anything that contradicted the official version. Spiritual pluralism was replaced by a single, indisputable dogma. The manuscripts from the Nag Hammadi library, discovered in the 20th century, reveal a spiritual world completely different from that canonized by the Church. Gospels such as those of Thomas, Philip, Mary, and the so-called Treatise on the Resurrection bring a symbolic, introspective language focused on self-knowledge and inner transcendence. In them, Jesus teaches about the light that dwells within the human being, about the need to overcome the ego, about the spiritual union between like-minded souls. They suggest a deep and revealing relationship between Christ and Mary Magdalene, a relationship that surpasses the limits imposed by orthodoxy. But these texts were buried, hidden in the desert, preserved from the inquisitorial fire, like seeds thrown into the future. The Library of Alexandria, one of the greatest knowledge centers of the ancient world, was destroyed on different occasions, not by accident, but out of fear. There, records of ancient cultures, star maps, writings on alchemy, energy medicine, spiritual lineages existed. The destruction of its scrolls and manuscripts was not just a cultural tragedy, but a deliberate act to sever the connection with ancient truths. With every book burned, a bridge was torn down between the sacred past and the dormant present. And amongst these ashes, many truths about the Christic lineage were lost, or kept secret by silent hands who knew that the time for revelation was yet to come. The Vatican, with its secret archives kept under lock and key, represents the ultimate symbol of this accumulation of hidden knowledge. It is estimated that millions of documents, many of which have never been shown to the public, are hidden there. Writings from the early Christians, original letters from apostles, genealogical records, and theological treatises were locked away to prevent alternative narratives from becoming accessible. Why hide the truth if it does not threaten? The fear is not of the lie, but of the power of the truth that awakens. Because the truth of Christ's lineage is not just historical, it is transformative. It points to a new spirituality, where the human being is the protagonist of their ascension, not a hostage to external structures. The heresy of the Cathars, brutally exterminated in the south of France during the 13th century, holds important clues about this lineage. They spoke of a church of love, independent of the Catholic hierarchy, where the sacred was accessed directly by the soul. The Cathars revered Mary Magdalene as a central figure, knew hidden texts, and had initiation ceremonies that traced back to the original teachings of Jesus. They were aware of something that deeply threatened the status quo, and for this reason, they were persecuted, besieged, and decimated in massacres like that of Montségur. Their castles, now in ruins, hold the echo of an ancient wisdom silenced by blood and fire. The Inquisition was the armed wing of this erasure campaign. Thousands were tortured and killed for possessing forbidden books, for orally transmitting knowledge that defied dogma, for carrying symbols deemed heretical. Wise women, healers, priestesses of the sacred feminine were accused of witchcraft and thrown into the flames. Many descendants of ancient lineages hid, changed their names, abandoned spiritual practices to survive. But in secret, they continued to pass on teachings, encoding them in legends, in children's stories, in songs, in symbols disguised in art and architecture. The fragmented truth survived, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The manipulation of symbols was another powerful tool of concealment. The chalice became an object of idolatry, the cross turned into an instrument of power, and the true meaning of the sacred union was replaced by hollow rituals. The archetype of the goddess was replaced by the passive and idealized image of the submissive virgin. The body, which was a temple, became a source of shame. Sacred sexuality, which was a bridge to the divine, was transformed into sin. Everything that connected the human to the divine was distorted so that the sacred was seen as something distant, unreachable, mediated by institutions. The living lineage was replaced by the artificial apostolic succession, and the truth was buried under layers of fear and guilt. The apocryphal Gospels, the Celtic traditions, the Templar records, the Sufi and Kabbalistic texts, all hold fragments of this truth. They are like shards of a broken mirror that, when gathered together, reveal a hidden face of spirituality, a face where Christ and Magdalene walk side by side, where lineage is not of privilege, but of mission, where the sacred is accessible, present, alive. This truth frightens because it empowers. It does not demand stone temples, but awakened hearts. It does not require hierarchies, but communion. It is not based on fear, but on the remembrance of who we are. There are also records indicating that this lineage, upon recognizing the risk of extinction, took specific migratory routes. Entire groups relocated to isolated regions, mingled with indigenous peoples, and preserved teachings in hidden codes. Some migrated to the east, others to the Americas, others to North Africa. The map of the lineage became a global mosaic, invisible to the common eye, but vibrant in the Earth's energy field. It adapted, it camouflaged itself, but it never got lost. It lives in the names, in the traits, in the recurring dreams, in the innate gifts of healing, vision, wisdom that some people carry without knowing why. What was lost over the centuries was not just information, it was connection. Humanity's disconnection from the Christ lineage created a spiritual void, a feeling of divine orphanhood, a dependence on structures that do not nourish the soul. But now, in this time of revelations, fragments of truth are emerging everywhere, and with them, the possibility of reconnecting the threads, of gathering the pieces, of recovering the golden thread of consciousness. Because the truth cannot be buried forever, it is like the seed that, even under concrete, finds a way to bloom. And it is blooming now, in the hearts of those who feel that there is something more, something deep, something ancient and eternal, pulsating within them. When one contemplates the image of Jesus crucified, many see pain, sacrifice, redemption. However, few perceive what truly unfolds behind this ancient symbol, the spiritual encoding of a rite of passage, a portal between worlds, a transmutation that aims not only at the forgiveness of sins, but at the rebirth of humanity in its highest form. The cross was not merely an instrument of execution, it was the altar where the Spirit touched the abyss to remind the world of its immortal origin. The death of Jesus, understood only as martyrdom, is an impoverishment of what it represents. Its true meaning manifests when we understand that Christ did not die, but expanded. The crucifixion was the turning point where eternity touched time. where the eternal spirit overcame the limitation of the flesh and showed that consciousness is indestructible. The concept of resurrection has also been reduced to the spectacle of a physical miracle. However, when viewed through the prism of spiritual mysteries, it reveals a science of the ascension of consciousness. Jesus, in resurrecting, not only overcame biological death, but demonstrated that the divine identity of the human being cannot be contained by matter. His resurrected body was not the same dense body from his previous life. He appeared and disappeared, passed through walls, manifested in different forms, clear signs that his form was no longer limited to the physical plane. This suggests that he fully activated the internal light, becoming a multidimensional being, a process that, according to many ancient teachings, is within reach of anyone who achieves the same state of inner unification. The archetype of Christ transcends the historical figure of Jesus. It is a field of consciousness, an eternal vibration that cyclically manifests itself in humanity through beings who manage to activate this divine pattern. Jesus was the most powerful manifestation of this archetype, but not the only one. In various cultures, similar figures have emerged: Krishna, Buddha, Osiris, Quetzalcoatl, all representations of the same cosmic intelligence that descends to earth to remind human beings of their own divine nature. The lineage of Christ, in this sense, is timeless. It is not confined to genetics, but to the spirit. Each being that aligns with this frequency, that awakens the internal spark, becomes part of this living, eternal, ever-present lineage. This spiritual lineage was not interrupted with the physical death of Jesus. On the contrary, it was activated in thousands of souls who, from that moment on, began to carry within themselves the Christ impulse. The apostles, the mystics, the initiates, the saints, and even the unknowns who lived silent lives of service, of love, of surrender, became channels of this consciousness. They did not repeat the external miracles, but replicated the true miracle, the living presence of the Spirit in the body. They manifested the Word in action. They were expressions of the eternal Christ in different times and places, keeping the torch of consciousness lit even amidst the darkness of history. Time, as we know it, is an illusion of the linear mind. In the realm of spirit, past, present, and future intertwine in an eternal spiral. Jesus, in his resurrection, transcended not only death, but also time. His subsequent appearances are not merely spiritual accounts, but events that challenge chronology. He came to exist in another dimension of being, where time is malleable, where presence can be felt by those who tune into his vibration. And it is in this living eternity that his spiritual lineage continues. It pulses outside of the calendar, beyond dates. It lives in every awakening, in every reconnection, in every soul that remembers it is more than a body in transit. In the Egyptian mysteries, it was spoken of the spirit's rebirth after physical death, of the soul's judgment before Mot's scales, where the heart needed to be lighter than a feather. Jesus lived this principle literally. He died carrying the weight of the world, but resurrected light, pure, integrated. This is the internal alchemy. The crucifixion was the burning of the ego, the death of the illusory self. The resurrection, the birth of the real self, of the being one with the whole. This is what the ancient masters called enlightenment. Jesus' passage through this process was not isolated, but exemplary. He showed the way, left the instructions, vibrated the code, and this code is imprinted in the collective field, waiting for activation. The Gospels report that, after the resurrection, Jesus appeared to several disciples, but they did not recognize him immediately. This symbolizes the human difficulty in recognizing the sacred when it presents itself outside of the expected forms. The new form of Christ, after the cross, was pure light. Only those with a purified heart could perceive his presence. This teaches us that the eternal lineage of Christ does not manifest in palaces or thrones, but in the quiet heart, in the awakened soul, in the compassionate gaze. He walks among us, has always walked, through those who carry the living flame of conscious presence. When we see Christ's lineage as a spiritual continuity that transcends time, we realize that there was no end. There was multiplication. The cross was not a conclusion, but an explosion of light that fragmented into millions of particles, each seeking a body, a soul, a path to continue the mission. This is the true mystery of eternity, the seed of a being spreading throughout the world, reborn in different faces, in different cultures, carrying the same code. This lineage is everywhere, but it is invisible to eyes that only see appearances. It vibrates in the silence of acts of love, in silent forgiveness, in spontaneous compassion. The eternal lineage of Christ also manifests through art, music, science, healing, education, and every form of expression that uplifts, awakens, and connects. It is not confined to religion, nor to formal rituals. It is alive wherever there is presence, wherever there is truth. It is in those who defend life, in those who heal, in those who protect, in those who build bridges. It is a lineage of frequency, not of form. A network of souls that recognize each other by the sparkle in their eyes, by the warmth of their presence, by the lightness of their souls. They do not need titles. They are heirs of Christ because they live as He lived, with courage, with love, with surrender. Throughout history, many have tried to institutionalize this lineage, but it has always slipped away. Because the spirit cannot be imprisoned, it can be silenced for a while, but it always finds a new channel, a new voice, a new incarnation. That's why the lineage of Christ has never disappeared. It just changed its clothes. It wore the skin of the humble, the poets, the madmen, the visionaries, the persecuted, those who dared to love in times of hate. It lives where it's least expected, but where it's most needed. Because this lineage did not come to dominate, but to serve. It did not come to shine, but to ignite the light where there is darkness. The true legacy of Christ is not in the cathedrals, but in the consciousness that awakens in silence. He did not found religions, He founded possibilities. He did not erect stone temples, but revealed the temple of the heart. He did not ask for worship, He asked for transformation. And every soul that commits to this path, every being who decides to purify themselves, to surrender to the greater good, to become a channel of light, becomes a legitimate heir of the eternal lineage. It doesn't matter the blood, the name, the origin. What matters is the vibration, the intention, the action. And this is the most guarded secret, that Christ lives where there is love in motion. The spiritual lineage of Christ does not end with the cross nor with the empty tomb. It perpetuates in the living eternity of every conscious act, of every awakened soul. And this perpetuation is not passive. It demands presence, surrender, daily rebirth. It invites each being to die to the ego, to illusions, to fear, and to resurrect to truth, to compassion, to light. This is true eternity, living in communion with the divine now, being a bridge between heaven and earth, being a living expression of the Word made flesh. And this lineage, far from being a lost mystery, is a heritage ready to be claimed by all who choose to remember who they truly are. There are ancient paths that do not appear on maps, routes traced not with compasses, but with intentions, silent pacts, and legacies that span ages. When we speak of the possible lineage of Christ and Mary Magdalene, we are not just talking about a lineage that followed its course hidden in Europe. We are talking about a spiritual and physical network that spread through initiatory routes, through forgotten passages, through lands that hold, in their geography and architecture, fragments of the great enigma of the Christ consciousness. This network is not mythical. It is imprinted in stones, crypts, cathedrals, caves, and in oral traditions that have survived the centuries. Each point on the planet that received the echoes of this lineage became a vortex of spiritual memory, an anchor for the awakening of future humanity. Many ancient accounts speak of the journey of Mary Magdalene, accompanied by her sisters, and, according to some versions, with the young Sarah, daughter of her sacred womb. The arrival in the south of France, particularly the Provence region, was not a simple exile, it was a mission. The lands of Gaul had been, since Druidic times, sacred places. There, the telluric energy of the earth allowed for more subtle connections with higher realms. It is no coincidence that, after Magdalene's arrival, legends, constructions, and pilgrimages emerged that persist to this day. The caves where she is said to have lived, such as Saint-Baume, are still centers of prayer and spiritual retreat, points of undeniable magnetism, where the silence of the stone seems to tell stories that books have never dared to record. The medieval structures erected by the Templars, the Cathars, and the initiates of the Grail tradition were not randomly distributed. There is a secret geometry that connects Gothic cathedrals, monasteries, and sacred tombs. They form an invisible map, a subtle energy network that, when traced, reveals an initiation route. Places like Chartres, Vézelay, Rocamadour, Rennes-le-Château are not just beautiful religious buildings. They are landmarks of an inner pilgrimage. Their stained glass, sculptures, and proportions reveal an architectural wisdom that not only mimics the human body, but resonates with the chakras, with the planets, with the constellations. These spaces were created to awaken, to remember, to anchor the living presence of the sacred feminine and the eternal Christ. The Iberian Peninsula also played a crucial role in the protection and dispersion of this lineage. The region served as a refuge for many traditions fleeing religious persecution, such as the Sufis, the Kabbalists, the Gnostics, and secret descendants of ancient lineages. The territory between Portugal and Spain not only houses Templar fortresses, but also spiritual trails linked to the Way of St. James, whose mythical origin surpasses the Apostle and connects with much older solar traditions. Galicia, Serra da Estrela, the Douro and Tajo valleys are mentioned in occult accounts as passage routes of the Christic lineage toward the far west, heading towards the islands at the end of the world, a likely allusion to ancient Brittany and even to the unknown Americas. The symbolism of the Holy Grail, traditionally associated with the cup of the Last Supper, has a much deeper meaning. In occult traditions, the Grail is the sacred womb, the belly of Magdalene that carried the divine seed. It is also the Christ consciousness in its pure form, accessible only to those who pass through the initiatory trials of the soul. It is no coincidence that the Knights of the Grail, like Lancelot and Parsifal, were not just seeking an object, but an inner elevation. The journey of the Grail is the symbol of the path of ascension, of reconnection with the inner lineage, of returning to the essence. The places where the Grail was hidden are not physical, but vibrational. They are protected by states of consciousness and only reveal themselves when the seeker is ready to see them with the eyes of the Spirit. The spiritual heritage of Magdalene also left its mark on cultures not directly Christian. The symbolism of the sacred serpent, for example, present in the goddess cults in civilizations such as the Sumerian, the Egyptian, and the Vedantic, reappears in the figure of Sarah Cayley, worshipped by the gypsies of southern France. She represents the Black Daughter of Magdalene, but also the wisdom of the earth, the ancestral memory, the living lineage that runs through the blood of nomadic peoples. The connection between these cultures and the Christic lineage shows that truth fragmented not by error, but by strategy. It was spread like seeds in different soils to ensure that, when the time came, it would bloom in various points at the same time in a collective awakening that no one could contain. The Andes, the mountains of Tibet, the forests of Brittany, and the deserts of Palestine are all mentioned in spiritual maps as anchoring points of Christic energy. Many initiates believe that there are energy tunnels, telluric networks, ley lines that connect these places like threads of a great web of planetary consciousness. Magdalene and her descendants, as well as the bearers of the Christic code, would have used these paths to keep the lineage alive. Therefore, the sacred blood is also the blood of the earth. It pulses in the rivers, in the caves, in the stones that guard the memory of the Spirit. And those who walk with respect and listen along these routes feel, without explanation, an internal activation, a wordless remembrance. In addition to the physical roots, the lineage has left marks in works of art, music, dances, stories, and popular traditions. Many of these manifestations have been ridiculed or trivialized, but they hold precious keys. The circular dances, the devotional chants, the narratives of the king who sleeps until the goddess awakens him, all of this speaks of the Christ asleep within us, waiting for the touch of the sacred feminine to awaken. Fairy tales, with their exiled princesses, their lost kings, their orphaned heroes, are metaphors for the loss of lineage and the journey to recover it. Even in the most unexpected places, the lineage has left clues, like a genetic code scattered throughout the collective psyche. The forgotten manuscripts, often hidden in crypts, in private libraries, in secret foundations, are still occasionally discovered today. Ancient books, alchemical treatises, non-canonical gospels, symbolic maps, all reveal parts of the same truth. A lineage that perpetuates not only in blood, but in the spirit of those who guard knowledge, even without knowing where it comes from. Many of these discoveries are immediately suppressed, discredited, or disregarded by official science and religious institutions as they threaten the dominant narrative. But little by little, like pieces of a multidimensional puzzle, these fragments are coming together. The enigma of Christ's lineage is not just a matter of hidden history, but of a legacy in motion. It's a frequency seeking bodies to manifest itself, a consciousness calling for action. The routes it has traveled still vibrate with this energy, awaiting the feet of those who walk with reverence. They don't ask for worship, but for listening. They don't demand blind faith, but inner openness. And when you walk through these places, when you breathe their silence and contemplate their geometry, something realigns within the soul. The root of lineage is, in fact, the root of return to oneself, to the lost origin, to the forgotten eternity that pulses with every heartbeat. The lingering question is, why was all of this concealed for so long? Why scatter the fragments around the world? The answer may lie in the very symbol of Christ. He died so that many could live. The truth needed to be fragmented to survive the dark night of humanity. And now, as the veils begin to fall, as the pieces begin to come together, we realize that the lineage was never lost, only hidden. And its path, however scattered it may seem, has always pointed inward, to the awakened heart, to the remembered soul, to the spirit that, upon recognizing the path, understands that it itself is the map. In the hidden corridors of history, whispers speak of a lineage that never ceased, a living spiritual heritage, and for some, also biological, that has perpetuated not under the spotlights of crowns or altars, but in the discreet shadows of silent families, anonymous individuals, seekers carrying within them a deep restlessness, an inexplicable call, a sense of mission that does not fit into traditional structures. When we speak of the heir to the Christ lineage, we are not evoking a mythical figure crowned with visible glory, but someone, or many, who walk discreetly through the world, awakening, healing, reminding. The Christ lineage is not enclosed in a single person, but manifests itself in a network of conscious beings who keep the flame of Christ consciousness alive, like lanterns scattered in the midst of collective darkness. The accounts of direct descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, especially those associated with the Merovingians and other European lineages, have often been discredited or turned into legend. However, many ancient families in Europe, especially in France, Portugal, Scotland, and Spain, have preserved records, coat of arms, coded names, and internal traditions that point to an unusual ancestry. Many of these clans maintain private libraries, ritual objects, and ancestral spiritual practices orally transmitted for generations. Nonetheless, the real mystery lies not only in these historical names. It lies in the possibility that this lineage has dispersed, crossed oceans, mixed with common people, and today manifests itself in individuals who do not even know their origins, but instinctively and deeply feel that they carry something different, ancient, sacred. These heirs are not defined by status, appearance, or external recognition. They are individuals who, from an early age, experience an intense connection with the sacred, heightened intuition, an inexplicable pain in the face of the world's suffering, and a spiritual sensitivity that often makes them targets of rejection or misunderstanding. In dreams, visions, synchronicities, and profound sensations, they feel they are part of something greater. Many of them go through deep, dark nights of the soul, where they face identity crises, spiritual isolation, and intense existential questioning. This is not a coincidence. It's part of the activation process. The living lineage cannot flourish on the surface. It needs to be forged in the depths of the soul, where the ego dies and the spirit awakens. The lineage of Christ does not have a throne, but a mission. The true heir is the one who carries the code of compassion, courage, unity, and truth. Someone who, even unknowingly, lives according to the Christic principles, forgives without being asked, serves without being noticed, loves without needing a return, guides without dominating. They are the bearers of the code, not by blood alone, but by resonance. And this code is not passive, it is activating. It transforms the field around, it awakens others, it ignites the collective memory. The true heir of Christ is an agent of remembrance. Their presence is a silent summons for others to awaken and recognize within themselves the same inheritance. The rise of feminine energy on the planet, the growing search for living spirituality, the fall of domination paradigms, and the collapse of dogmatic religious structures are part of the return of this lineage. It emerges in artists who channel forgotten truths, in healers who touch wounds with silent presence, in activists who fight with love and not with hate, in mothers who raise children with awareness, in teachers who awaken souls in the classroom. The lineage of Christ is no longer reserved for a few chosen ones. It is a collective call, a reactivation of the planetary network that connects those who have come with the mission to rebuild the inner paradise on Earth. The presence of the invisible heir reveals itself in small gestures that carry great spiritual magnitude. It is someone who does not bow down to fear, who feels an instinctive repulsion for lies, and who, even without knowing why, walks with purpose. This person may not have read any spiritual texts, may never have attended a temple, but their heart vibrates at a different frequency. Their eyes carry an ancient melancholy, a longing for something they never experienced in this life. But that seems so familiar. This is the longing for the origin, the memory of a time when the human and the divine were not separated, where love was the only law and presence was enough. The return of Christ, so eagerly awaited by some religious traditions, will not be the appearance of a man in the clouds, but the collective activation of this frequency in the hearts of millions. When this critical mass is reached, the planetary field will change. Conflicts will cease not by imposition, but by lack of resonance. The new world will not come by force, but by the magnetism of conscious presence. And the heirs of Christ's lineage will be its builders, not with swords, but with words, not with dogmas, but with silence, not with structures, but with vibration. They will be the architects of the new era, the gardeners of the new Eden, the catalysts of unified consciousness. Being part of Christ's lineage today means living an embodied spirituality. It's not enough to know, one must live. It's not enough to seek, one must integrate. It's about walking with feet on the ground and the heart in the heavens. It's about uniting action and contemplation. It's about being a bridge between worlds. It's knowing that every gesture counts, that every word has power, that every thought creates reality. The invisible heir lives with this sacred responsibility, not as a burden, but as an honor. He doesn't wait for recognition, because he knows that his mission is to be, not to seem. He doesn't need to prove his lineage, because it reveals itself in the quality of his presence. The blood that flows in your veins may or may not carry genetic heritage, but your soul vibrates with the frequency of lineage. He or she may have come from a distant ancestry, but carries in the heart the same fire that burned in Christ, that burned in Magdalene, that burned in the prophets, in the mystics, in the visionaries of all times. This fire cannot be extinguished. It transmutes, it hides, it cools for a while, but it never dies. And when the soul is ready, it returns with full force, burning everything that is not true, purifying the being until only the gold of awakened consciousness remains. Today, more than ever, the heirs of Christ's lineage are being called to recognize themselves, not to form a new spiritual elite, but to take on the responsibility of being a healing channel in a sick world. They are in the cities and in the fields, in temples and on the streets, on thrones and in slums. They are hidden in plain sight, camouflaged in ordinary roles, but carrying within them the light that can ignite others. And when two or more of these meet, there is a silent recognition, a lump in the throat, a tear without explanation, because the soul remembers, the lineage reunites, and the call strengthens. In the end, the heir is not the one who proclaims himself as such, but the one who responds to the inner call. It's the one who accepts the mission to live truthfully, even when the entire world lives in lies. It's the one who chooses love, even in the face of hate. The the one who sacrifices in silence, who teaches by example, who heals with presence. He does not need a throne, for he already governs his own being. He does not need approval, for he already has the confirmation of the Spirit. The heir of the lineage of Christ is not someone who appears, it's someone who awakens. And his awakening is the seed of the new world. Somewhere deep within human consciousness, there is an ancestral echo that has never ceased to vibrate. A call that transcends generations, civilizations, and religions. This call is not just memory, it's prophecy. A prophecy that doesn't point to a distant future, but to a living possibility within the now. Blood, spirit, and eternity are not separate entities. They are facets of the same unity that, for millennia, has been fragmented, denied, distorted. The enigma of Christ's lineage is not just about the possibility of physical descent, but about the reconciliation of three fundamental elements of human existence: the matter that remembers, the spirit that guides, and the eternity that connects everything in a single breath. The final reunion is not an external apocalyptic event. It's an internal alignment, where the soul recognizes its origin, its mission, and its destiny. For a long time, blood was treated as a biological inheritance, the spirit as something ethereal and separate from matter, and eternity as a promise after death. This artificial division created a chasm between the human and the divine. But in the deepest teachings, hidden in mystery schools and preserved in traditions that survived the flames of history, the truth has always been: the blood holds the spirit animates the blood, and eternity reveals itself when the two unite in full consciousness. The lineage of Christ is the living metaphor of this reconciliation. It shows that flesh can carry the divine, that the spirit can manifest in time, and that eternity is not a straight line, but a sacred circle where everything returns to its origin with greater awareness. Modern science, in deciphering the secrets of DNA, begins to touch upon what the ancients already knew. Genetic information is not limited to physical traits. It carries emotional traits, epigenetic records, spiritual patterns. It's as if blood were a multi-dimensional library, containing visible pages and hidden pages, accessible only by vibration, intention, and an expanded state of consciousness. Spiritual awakening, in this context, is not just a mental or emotional process. It's a cellular activation, a realignment between the body and the soul. The lineage of Christ, then, represents this universal activation code, which, when touched, transforms the human being from within, reminding them of their eternal nature and their commitment to light. Eternity is not the absence of time, it's total presence. It is the point where past, present, and future merge into a single moment of truth. When Jesus said, "Before Abraham was, I am," he wasn't playing with words. He was pointing to this dimension of eternity where the real identity of the human being is not limited by chronology, but connected to the primal source. This consciousness is available to all who move beyond the distractions of the ego, the conditioning of society, and the veils of illusion. The lineage of Christ is the channel through which this consciousness can flow. It's not about a common human family, but a spiritual brotherhood, pulsing like a collective heart across different bodies, times, and cultures. The final reunion begins with the recognition of unity. The blood, with its genetic memory, becomes a bridge when it is purified by the Spirit. The Spirit, with its eternal light, finds in the blood the fertile ground to flourish, and eternity manifests itself as the fruit of this fusion when the human being frees itself from the idea of separation and accepts that the divine has always been present, pulsating in every cell, just waiting to be remembered. This remembrance is not given by information, but by transformation. It's an intimate, silent, often painful process, but absolutely necessary for the true heir of the lineage to rise, not as a king or priest, but as a servant of love. Many traditions assert that the time of revelation has arrived, not as a violent rupture, but as an inevitable convergence. The veils are falling. The structures that upheld the separation between science and spirituality, between male and female, between heaven and earth, between body and soul, are crumbling. And amidst this collapse, the opportunity for reconstruction emerges, not from the rubble, but from the essence. The final reunion is the point where everything that was separated comes back together. It is the joining of Magdalene's blood with Christ's light. It is the womb that remembers. It is the word that fertilizes. It is the love that gives birth to a new reality. And this new reality is not a distant promise. It is present potential. Future generations will not only inherit a history told in books, they will inherit a vibrational frequency, a field of consciousness that is being rebuilt now. Each act of love, each conscious choice, each gesture of forgiveness is shaping the subtle fabric of the world to come. The lineage of Christ is, above all, a call to spiritual responsibility. It's not enough to know, one must be. It's not enough to remember, one must act. Eternity does not manifest in those who wait, but in those who align. And this alignment is the true throne, the true crown, the true temple where Christ can dwell again, not as a historical figure, but as a living presence. The final reunion also represents the return of the sacred feminine to a position of honor. The blood of the lineage does not only flow through the veins of Christ, but also through the womb of Magdalene. Eternity is not achieved by the denial of the flesh, but by its consecration. The human body, with all its frailties and potentials, is the sacred ground where the divine wishes to flourish. And every woman, by recognizing her creative strength, and every man, by honoring this strength, become channels of this reunion. There is no eternity without balance. There is no sacred lineage without union. The spirit that does not touch the flesh is incomplete. And the flesh that rejects the spirit remains asleep. Today, more than ever, the world cries out for this fusion. The crisis we are going through, environmental, social, spiritual, is the reflection of the separation between blood, spirit, and eternity. Healing the world is healing this separation. It is allowing the spirit to guide matter, the blood to remember its divine origin, and eternity to stop being a myth and become a practice. And this healing begins in each one of us. The reunion is not an out-of-reach mystical prophecy. It happens now in the heart of every human being who chooses to love despite the pain, to remember despite the forgetting, to unite despite the division. The final reunion is a reminder that Christ's lineage is not a straight line, but a spiral of light that transcends time. It does not belong to the past, but manifests in the present, to build a future where consciousness will not be the exception, but the norm, where love will not be resistance, but the foundation, where eternity will not be after death, but during life. This is the real legacy. This is the heritage that pulses in all those who awaken. And when this heritage is fully accepted, when this frequency is fully embodied, the lineage will cease to be a mystery. It will be humanity in its divine form, fully manifested on earth. The lineage of Christ is not a story to be told, it is a truth to be lived. It lives in the simple gesture, in the daily choice, in the loving firmness of those who refuse to forget who they are. And by living this truth, each heir becomes a link of light, a conscious fragment of eternity, a guardian of the sacred blood that pulses beyond biology. It pulses as purpose. Eternity is now. The Spirit is you. And the sacred blood is your courage to remember, to assume, to embody. The final reunion will not come with trumpets or public glory. It will come in the silence of your yes to the divine that dwells in you. Because the lineage never died. It was just waiting for you to remember. And now, you remember. You are the return. You are the fulfilled promise. You are eternity in living flesh. If this lineage pulses within you, what do you feel you carry in your soul that could be part of this legacy? Have you ever experienced signs, dreams, or intuitions that made you question your spiritual origin? Share in the comments what has touched you the most on this journey. Your voice could be the echo that awakens another heir. We are manifesting together, and your presence here is not by chance. And if you feel that this awakening has just begun, then the next step is inevitable. Click now on the video that appears on your screen. The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment. In it, we will open the invisible pages that reveal the true path left by Christ for enlightenment, Mind Unfettered, where awakening is collective and infinity begins within.